this. Much appreciated. I'll just introduce you. So, Fransisco Mahfuz, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have been an international financial advisor for the last 12 years, and you're fully qualified as a UK advisor. Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
I started at one of the perhaps worst times to start in this career, which was 2008. I started as an international financial advisor in 2008, just after everything went to hell. So whatever is going on now is no news to me. I think it's a very good way to start at the hardest period possible, and then things got a lot easier after that.
Just out of interest, do you think this is going to be harder than 2008?
I mean, it's just very different things, though, isn't it? 2008 was, for a lot of people, just a theoretical crisis because if it didn't affect their job, then it basically didn't affect them. The stock market maybe made them a bit upset, but after a while things were moving in the right direction. There were no real life consequences to what happened if your job was not affected. Maybe mortgages and things of that nature, but for a lot of people that I know, it was boring, but it didn't really have any impact. This is very different because so far the impact on the stock market actually hasn't been that great. The impact on the economy we're still yet to see, but the US has something like 25% unemployment right now. Spain is probably not far behind, and every single person has had their life disrupted in one way or another. So I think we'll miss the good old days of 2008 in the next 6 months, because that was the crisis that is a lot easier to get past for most people. Obviously, for a lot of people, it was very difficult financially.
Yeah, and that's depression levels 25%, isn't it? It's 25%, up to 25% is considered. Yeah, the financial recession is of depression levels. That's what it was back in the Wall Street crash, the depression of the 30s. It was just over 25%, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think that the official criteria for what's a depression or recession is the unemployment rate. I think it's more to do with the growth or lack of growth in the economy. But 25% unemployment is unprecedented. I don't think it was that high in the Great Depression.
Right. Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it. Okay. The reason I've invited you on is because you're a financial advisor, and just a brief description of what I'm doing. So I'm creating a new platform for a new education system, really, that teaches students between the ages of 13 to 18, teenagers, life applicable knowledge. One of them being the concepts of money that were never taught about at school, from saving to managing debt, to investment, so on and so forth. That's why I've invited you on. Before we get into that, can I just ask you what your view is of the current education system, and do you think there's anything that we could keep?
We can probably keep the physical buildings. It's not a great deal more. I'm not a fan. I mean, and to explain exactly why I'm not a fan, it helps to understand that when I was a kid, I went to a Montessori school. So Montessori schools are very different. You have a lot of autonomy. You don't have to ask the teacher to go to the bathroom. You don't have to ask the teacher to do different things in the classroom. You just have to be doing something. You have a whole bunch of materials you can interact with, and you basically decide what your course is. And then you end up learning the same things, but you do it in a way that is a lot more entertaining and feels like you have some sort of control over it. And then when I was 10, I went to what was supposedly a better school, and it was a German school. And then it was, 40 students in a classroom listening to a teacher for an hour at a time. And it was just the most boring thing ever. It was very difficult to be engaged. And it took me a while, and I used to be a very good student, and it took me a while to get back into being a good student because I was just bored the whole time. So I think that more and more it's become obvious that this way of teaching, where we're just trying to have people sit down and absorb knowledge that is not very practical and definitely not very interesting for them, it just doesn't work. You spend hours and hours doing it, no one learns anything, and everybody hates it. So, high time to change it.
I completely agree with that. And the kids, do you remember the kids in school that used to be disruptive? You kind of used to think that they might have a behavioural disorder, or that's what they were labelled as, having a behavioural disorder. But now I look back and I think they were just so bored. They just were not stimulated. And I suppose they created kind of, I'm thinking of certain scenarios. They acted up, they misbehaved, probably just strangely to stimulate themselves. It sounds weird. But I can see why they did it, just to get a laugh from their peers, if anything, just looking for attention, I guess, but they're so bored.
Yeah, and we do the same thing. I mean, now with smartphones, this has become more obvious than ever. You are in a meeting, you are in a presentation, sometimes you're even talking to your friends, and there's that natural inclination to just pick up your phone and start looking for something more interesting. And that's what we used to do in school, where we had no smartphones, so we just fidgeted and tried to talk to the person next to us, or doodled on the desk or something, because our attention wasn't engaged.
Yeah, I completely agree. I could go on about this for hours, but I'll get into, I'm going to pick your brain now. So, first question with regards to sort of financial advice, I guess, is what do you think are the most important principles that we should be teaching our students?
The most important principles are saving, budgeting, planning, and then investing, or in that order. So saving, budgeting, planning, and investing. And so that's the short answer. The longer answer, I have a little story for that, which is how I grew up. So my interactions with money when I grew up. So my family didn't have a great deal of money. I don't remember if I had an allowance, but if I had one, it was very small. But then, my parents and my grandparents and my uncles always gave me money for Christmas or New Year's Eve or for my birthday or whatever. And because I didn't have much money, I saved that because sometimes I wanted to buy something that was a bit more expensive. So, I don't know, a bicycle, for example. And I just got into the habit of saving that for when I wanted to buy something that my parents would never afford or didn't want to pay for, and then I had it. So what I didn't do is spend money on a whole bunch of silly things. I learned how to save very early on, and then it was easy to think, okay, but if I want to buy this thing, how many birthdays or Christmas do I need to save for that? And my parents did help, but it helped get into my head, just come to my mom and say, listen, I've got enough money for half of it, but I don't want to wait until my next birthday to buy it. So can I buy it now, and then maybe you just don't give me anything for my birthday later or whatever. And just being able to do those simple things, I mean, a lot of people can't do them now. I have a lot of friends who just can't think, beyond the current month.
Yeah, I know loads of people. And if I'm honest, I suffered as well. I didn't respect debt, and I got myself into a few difficulties. I'm all right now, but... And it's strange as well, I don't know what you think, but at school, the whole premise really is to become educated, to go out and get a good job in order to earn money so you can buy a house and things like that. But we're not taught about money or how to manage it or to develop the right habits, the right disciplines to manage our money, debt, and putting money aside for savings. I look back in my teens and I don't remember anyone saving any money. Maybe the odd person, but people would just take their weekly wage and just go out and party and drink.
When I got to London in 2003, I remember I was setting up my first credit card with HSBC, and the guy asked me, so how much of your credit card do you want to pay every month? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. And he said, so how much of what you owe do you want to pay every month? And I said, oh, everything. I said, everything? Yeah, if I have 500 quid that I owe on my credit card, I want to pay the 500 quid at the end of the month. And he said, oh, nobody does that. And I said, but if I don't pay, I'll pay interest, right? It will cost me more if I don't pay every month. Yes. Well, then why would I not pay every month? So, and then I did speak to people at the time, and they would tell me, I was asking them, do you have any money saved? And they said, yeah, I haven't got much in the bank, but I've got $3,000 on my credit card. I said, what does that mean? Oh, I can take $3,000 from my credit card.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot more expensive, right? You pay a lot more for that $3,000, and they couldn't get the concept around their heads.
Yeah, it's not drummed into us. So what you mentioned at the very beginning, I think there was 4 areas there. Could you just elaborate on each of those areas for me?
Sure. So saving, budgeting, planning, and then investing. So saving is just a habit of not spending everything you have. So you get money, some of it is for now, some of it is for later. So this is an expression I use with clients sometimes, which is you need to pay your bills now, and then you need to pay yourself in the future. All right, so maybe yourself a month on the line, maybe yourself 6 months on the line. So it's just a habit or the discipline of not spending everything that you earn.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, saving. Budgeting is simply having an understanding of what your costs are. So how much does it cost to live? And you'll be surprised that hardly anyone knows this. Right? You just don't get into the habit of saying, okay, my rent is this, my cost of all these different things are this, so I need, I don't know, 2,000 euros every month to live. Mm-hmm. Okay? So if I'm earning 2,500, then arguably I should be able to save 500. But most people they don't have no idea. So they're just like, oh, the money's run out. So for the last week of the month, I'm eating, beans on toast.
Yeah.
So that would be budgeting. It's just understanding what comes in and what goes out. Planning would be the ability to say, okay, I want to buy this thing, or I want to spend money on this thing 6 months on the line, or 5 years down the line. How much does it cost, and how much do I need to save starting now to get to that point?
Yeah.
Right? And then the last one is investing. Is okay, so you've done all the other things right. You saved, you budgeted, you planned, but now you need to make that money, do something for you. You can't just, because it's very difficult to save for some of the bigger things in life. You just don't have enough savings to buy them. So how do you invest? So where do you put the money? How does risk work? What's a good approach to invest? What's a bad approach to invest? What do you do with the markets when they're going crazy? So that's what I would say is a more advanced skill. And I don't think younger people are really going to get much use out of that. When they're 14 or 15, you can start teaching them. But, saving, budgeting, and planning are probably the ones you have to drum into younger people. And then when they start getting closer to their, 16, 17, 18, maybe you can start doing a bit with investing.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand that. It's interesting with regards to the saving side of things, because even I'm ignorant. I know nothing even now about investing. And I think, would you agree with this, that people tend to, if they are going to save money, they stay with their own bank and they'll do whatever their banker advises. We'll put it into this account. It's an extra, I don't even know what the interest rates are at the moment. What, 1%?
Not that much.
They'll rarely look outside. Obviously that's where you come in. So with regards to those areas that you mentioned, I know it sounds like an obvious question really going forward. We might have already touched on it, but why is it important to learn them?
The first three are the foundation. So if you don't have those things, you have no solid understanding of money. Right? So if you can't save, budget, and plan, you just don't know how to manage money. Now that doesn't mean you couldn't invest well, because someone can say, oh, I like Amazon, I'll invest in Amazon, and 10 years down the line your money has gone up 10 times. Now that's fine, and maybe investing is something you can learn how to do without learning the other things, but then you get yourself into all sorts of trouble, right? And the people that don't know how to save, plan, budget, and plan, they essentially cannot do anything with money unless they earn so much that their mistakes are irrelevant. Yeah. But most people are not like that. Most people that don't save, have no idea how to budget and plan, they are always living month to month. Oh, can you go on a holiday? Well, I don't know, if I tighten the belt for the next 2 months, we can go on holiday. And, then you have children, and then everything becomes harder. And then people start talking about buying houses or, retiring one day, and it's just impossible to consider that, and that's why they don't.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know what the stats are, but most people, there's a large percentage of people in the US who aren't in a position to retire due to their financial setup because they haven't learnt these principles. What, from your point of view, are the best strategies to help teach them to these age groups? And can you highlight any practical steps? Are there any games that they can play at school? I don't know if that's an idea, or something where something that's a little bit more tangible, where it's practical and they can then take it into real life?
Sure. The most tangible example I've ever heard is not from my life, but I love it, which is this father who wanted to teach his children how much things cost. So what he did is he went to his bank and said, listen, I know this is going to sound a bit strange, but can I please have all of my salary this month, or the equivalent of my salary, in cash?
Okay.
So he got all of his salary in bags of cash, came home, and one time, I think just before dinner, he said, listen, I want to have a quick family meeting. All right, so I know you guys don't quite understand what I do and what money is and whatever, but this is everything I get paid in a month. So he just dropped these bags of cash on the table. And he said, as we spend things, we're going to start taking this out. So I think he actually did the exercise. He had a budget, and he said, okay, so this is rent. And they started moving money aside to pay rent. And this is the food, and this is this, and this is that. And then it was just such a visual thing that the children had, oh, right, they had no idea that electricity cost that much, or that our food was so much money. Now I know, this is your allowance. So that's an interesting one. Maybe not to do with your whole month's salary, but I think it's quite interesting if you were to get a child who gets, 10 quid, 20 quid as an allowance and say, okay, so this is your allowance. This is how much we spend every month. And you just do that visual representation. You could probably do it without the actual cash. You could just do something else, fake cash from a Monopoly board or whatever, but you're going to need a lot of Monopoly boards to do that. So other things you can do are, I think at home, the parents can incentivize the children by, for example, suggesting that they save money and then giving them interest on their savings. So say, listen, I can give you, I don't know, if your allowance is 10 pounds, I can give you 10, or if I give you 9, at the end of the month, I'll give you back another 2 pounds. Right? So something like that. Just something very simple to understand that if you save money, you have more. Right? So something very basic like that.
You're rewarded for the discipline.
Yeah. What you can also do is you can have them pay a symbolic cost for the household expenses. So you can say, for example, okay, so your allowance is 10 pounds, but out of those 10 pounds, we're going to take 1 pound every month, or make it 11 and say we'll take 1 to pay for the rent and the electricity and the water and whatever. If any of those things go up in the month, we'll take a little more than the pound. If they go down, we'll take less. So they just get a feeling for, we're eating too much or eating fancy things or we're going out too much, then that's going to affect your money on a month-to-month basis. Not that I don't think children should pay rent, but I think it's a great idea to have them understand that the part of what you're earning goes to cover your costs.
Yeah.
Instead of this is just money to spend on whatever you want. Okay.
And is this something you're advocating the parents do? Because if the parents are financially illiterate, they've grown up, I don't know, they're in their 40s now. Are they going to be willing to do something like that? Is it better for it to be something that's taught at school, which is what I'm trying to advocate? I understand the principle and the analogy. That sounds really good. But it would be better to be taught at school, no?
I think it's better if it's taught at school because then you're going to get a broader reach and it's a more uniform approach. I think school should push some of the things out to the parents. Make it a project. The school decides how it's done and just gets the buy-in of the parents, and then the parents can do it as well because the school is only going to be able to do certain parts of this, right? So sure, teach it at school, but when it comes to, say, your allowances, the school doesn't pay the kids an allowance, so that might be slightly difficult to do. What the school can do is they can make a game out of it, right? So, for example, they can give them fake money, virtual money, and then divide people into groups and say, you're a family, you're a family, you're a family. This is your fake. You have this much fake money, and then they have a household budget, and then they have their goals. The fun things they want to do, and then find some way that they're either spending on the fun things or they're just spending on the more sensible things, and then whoever gets closer to the goals they had in the beginning wins that game. Right? So you can try to gamify it to some extent.
Yeah,
so have
incentivize the families to all come together and work on it. What will be the incentive, though? It couldn't be money itself, because I suppose the school, you can't expect the schools to financially give families gifts. So how could we incentivize the families to be a part of this?
I think that's a much harder question to answer from the school side, because if the parents are illiterate and not willing to learn, then you have a problem. If they're willing to learn, then great. You can have someone that is either financial advisor or trained with some aspects of what a financial advisor does to teach the parents all the trouble they're likely to be getting in if they're not clearly aware of it, and then say, listen, we want to run this project so the kids learn very young how to manage money, but we're going to need your help a little bit. Right? And, some parents will do it, some parents won't. So ideally the school is going to do in-house as much as they can.
Yeah.
And then if the parents don't pick up the slack, then it's not all lost. But for example, the school can also do is, if you're having a class where you're teaching kids about money, you can show them, for example, you just pick an allowance amount and then show the kids, help them work out how much does a bicycle cost. How many months of saving your allowance buys a bicycle? How many buys a house? How many buys a trip? How many buy whatever, right? Okay. So they can say, I want to buy a video game. Okay, so let's pick an allowance amount that's kind of an average for everyone in the class. Okay, to buy this video game with your allowance, you need to spend all of your allowance over 6 months or a year, or you need to save half of your allowance for X amount of time. Right? So there's a whole bunch of concepts you can do by just picking things that they care about and showing them what it costs. So that's a fairly easy one. And another one that, again, schools can do is teach slightly older kids how to invest by having them invest in a fake portfolio. Right? So you teach them about what investment is and talk about some companies, have them suggest companies that they think are good companies, and then you're going to get Amazon and Nike and Sony or companies like that, and then you tell them, okay, this is the talk about the companies, and then they have to decide how much money they invest in each of them, and then the school can just follow that in real time. They can say, oh, listen, everything is going well for Amazon, but it's not going so well for Nike. What do you do?
Yeah.
Right? So again, it is pretty easy to do. It doesn't take any material investment. You can just do it on a spreadsheet, and you can get a lot of teaching out of that. And I think the kids will get a taste for that, as well as figuring out what the mistakes are without having to spend any of their money.
That's a good idea. You can set up some fake accounts now at the moment. You can actually trade, can't you? But not with real money. And you're suggesting personalise it. So the original example you were giving, how teaching kids how to budget. So they want a computer game in their own life, or they want a bike or radio control car. They learn how to budget for it. So they take in how much they're earning or how much they make, whether it be pocket money or they've got their own job, and they learn to budget for what they want. Yeah.
And you could do all of that, because you could say to kids, you could make it completely personal. You could say, okay, let's say you do this with a computer program or a spreadsheet or whatever, right? You say, okay, you type in what your allowance is, you type in how much you want to save, and then you choose your investments, right? Now, again, you might need a good software to do that, but I'm pretty sure there are platforms that will do that online. And then the kids can decide. Some kids will decide to save all of their allowance because they're trying to buy a fancy bicycle. Some kids will save almost nothing. Some kids will save but not invest. And then you can just keep following that. And 3 months down the line, you say, okay, this is what's happening. And again, you could play with the timings so the impact is bigger, right? So pretend that 3 months is a year. Pretend that a year is 5 years. Right, but then you say, okay, some kids will be saving nothing because they want to spend their money, and they'll have nothing. And some kids will be doing well with investments or saving, but you can get very different outcomes and lots of stuff to talk about, and people get a much better understanding of how these things work in the real world.
Absolutely. The only thing that you can't force children to be interested, I suppose, but at least they'll pick up the basic principles. But there will be a larger proportion of children that will understand the concepts of money. And as a society moving forward, or a generation moving forward, there'll be more financially literate. Not fully necessarily, but there'll be more. No, I like that. I like that idea. Can you think of any ways to, create interest for those group of children that wouldn't be so interested at the start?
I think that the gamification is the one that's likely to work better for children. If you're making a competition out of it, make a game out of it,
Yep.
then you have a much bigger chance of buying, right? Because you could talk to them about, particularly with slightly older kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? How much money do you want to earn? What types of things you want to buy? What types of trips you want to do? Or talk about people that they are interested in, so YouTubers and, social media influencers or artists, and say, how rich do you think this person is? How this rich? Okay. And then you just sort of talk about, okay, how much each profession earns and stuff, and then say, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to run a game for the next few months, and you decide what is your objective. So do you want to become, have as much money as a doctor or as, Jay-Z, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody gets sort of a similar starting point, if you want to make it fair, and then you play with all these variables, right? So, I would have loved that class in school.
Yeah.
It's a lot more interesting than most of the stuff I'm doing, right? And you could have like the Jay-Z team, and you can have the doctor team, and you can have the just enough money to go to the beach and not worry about team, and then just see who's doing better with their objectives. You could play with a lot of different variables, right? But I think if you make a game out of it, I find it difficult to think why it wouldn't be interesting. You have to hide how much financial advice is in there, but they will get a lot of the concepts in the beginning, and then you make it more complicated as it goes on.
Yeah, the element of competition will definitely make it more exciting, and I suppose the reinforcement of the idea that if you do well now in investments, you're taking that forward into your adulthood, and you're much more likely to be successful financially.
Yeah.
I like it. With regards to benefits, it might seem obvious to people listening what the benefits are because you've articulated them quite well, but what about sort of socially? What do you think the benefits would be if we taught children from a young age how to become financially literate?
I tend to think of it as the following. If you don't learn how to control your money controls you. So one of the very first things is that people that don't learn how to do this well, they are, unless they earn a lot of money in their career, but they tend to be more stressed out than they needed to be. There's a lot of anxiety that goes along with not being confident with money and not saving and not having the peace of mind to know that a pandemic could hit tomorrow and you're not going to be out on the street because you have savings, right? So a lot of the problems we're going to have in the world now, the economy at least, wouldn't be significantly large problems if everybody had been taught to save from early on and they had 3 to 6 months of earnings stashed away. So all of this tragedy that it is that some people can't work and can't pay the rent 2 weeks down the line, as is the case in America, that wouldn't have happened if everybody had been taught to save what they need to save. So from a social point of view, I think we have a much more, it's a much calmer and less prone to panic and crisis, so society less prone to panic and crisis if everybody has a bigger safety net. Now, you could argue that the government should be the safety net, and I think it should to a great extent, but if everybody is also looking after themselves, we know that something that's happening, like what's happening now, does not mean that these people will be homeless in a month's time. So that for sure is one of the situations, and also there's all the aspects of all the bad things that people tend to do because they don't have enough money. So credit card debt, which is just a waste of personal money and money that perhaps credit card companies shouldn't be earning, that money is just wasted, right? Enriching credit card companies for no good purpose. Retirement is always a massive issue, and it's going to become a bigger issue because we're all getting older and dying later. So it's a big cost to society, which would be less of a problem if people saved and took a lot of that burden on themselves, as they do in some countries, like the Nordic countries.
It's all about self-responsibility, isn't it, really, rather than looking for kind of support from the government. I mean, that should be the priority. And even if you do lose a large amount of wealth, at least you have the strategies to be able to build yourself back up again. Yep. You look around at society now, and I'd even include myself, if I lost all my money, I wouldn't know how to get back to where I was quickly enough. Sure. You know, and that comes to ignorance. But it blows my mind that this stuff is not taught at school. What the concepts of money, I mean, that's the reason primarily I think that we're educated is, as I said earlier, is to get a good job to earn money. Okay, this is in contrast to the last question, but what are the ramifications going forward, do you think, the negative effects of not teaching this? Do you think it's going to create more instability?
I think it's going to keep stability. So first of all, things are just not going to get better. From even if the economy stays similar to what it is now, the world is similar to what it was before the pandemic, things are not going to improve. So that's the first problem. So people will continue to struggle to do the things they want with money. Most people that I know that are sort of our age would like to buy a house and can't, right? Because it's just too expensive. There's no way they will ever be able to unless they're going to cripple themselves with that. So that's going to continue to be a problem. You know, there's a lot of people that worry about automation taking away a lot of jobs. If that's the case, the more dependent you are on a regular job to pay your bills at the end of the month, the bigger the problem you're going to have. Right? Because a lot of people love the idea of leaving their company job and becoming self-employed and then having more control over their time and what they do with their life. But if you don't have any money behind you, that's just impossible for some people. Right? So I think if people don't learn how to do this well, then what's that quote from Fight Club? We work in jobs we hate to buy things we don't need, right? And this is another thing I've learned a bit later in life, which is the more secure you are with your money, the more savings you have, the more investments you have, the less you need to do a job you not necessarily hate, but that you don't like. Right? Because the opposite is usually what happens. People have a house that is too expensive for them. They have a lifestyle that is too expensive for them. So then they have to do the job that gives them that much money. And I says, well, but your job makes you travel 3 weeks of the month. You hardly see your family. You're always stressed out. Why don't you just take a different job? Well, because no other job will pay me what this job pays me. And if I don't have this much money, I need to change my life. Well, maybe change your life slightly so you can have a healthier job and then everything else is better. But again, if people live month to month and never learn how to manage their money better, they won't even understand this concept that one way to have a better life is not have more money, is just have less expenses. You don't need to earn more, you just need to spend less. It's the same thing, right? If you just didn't spend on things you don't really need or didn't really care about, then a 20% discount on your expenses is the same as a 20% increase in your salary. And it's a lot easier to reduce your cost by 20% than it is to gain a 20% increase in salary.
That's so true. And it's not just obviously the financial side of things, it's the mental side of things, isn't it? I mean, people who don't have these habits in place already, they probably drink a lot, eat badly. I'm not saying that, I mean, that is a generalization, but I think if you're financially more disciplined, you're going to be psychologically more disciplined, Oh, I mean, it's one of the biggest issues with people's mental health is how concerned they are about money. So there's lots of research that indicates that almost any fantastically good or bad thing in your life becomes routine after about a year. So you could lose your legs or you could win the lottery. A year down the line, your life satisfaction is about the same. The slowest thing to recover from, and that some people just don't recover from, is when, for example, you lose your job. So losing your job and not being able to earn money is one of the worst things that can happen to your mental health. And I've seen research that indicates, and this is to me this is super interesting, is that being concerned about money or just not having enough money makes you less smart. And what the way they did it was very simple. They
I think they just took some basic intelligence tests,
Yeah.
and they did it a few days after people's salary had come in and a few days before. So they know that you're just about running out of money, your bills are coming due and you don't have the money, take the test. And then all the money has come in, you pay the bills, take the test again.
Yeah.
I think it was something like your IQ was 10% lower when you were concerned about having bills to pay. It was kind of shocking. Right?
Is that due to fear factor anxiety, is it? And then momentarily feeling abundant, I suppose, when you have them.
I think it's the anxiety and the stress. I mean, this is my interpretation. The anxiety and the stress, one, do a lot of nasty things to your system, to physical and mental health, but also they're just taking a brain space because you're worried about them. You know, if you talk to people that have a lot of money, one of the biggest benefit that they will tell you about having a lot of money is never thinking about money. It's like, oh, I want to buy something, I buy it. I have a bill to pay, I pay it. Right? It's just not a thing I think about. Whereas if you don't have enough money, you think about money all the time. And surely that's taking up space that could be used for other things. And it also explains why people that don't have that much money and have a lower socioeconomic status don't tend to be, incredible performers in every area of life compared to people that have more money, because they're constantly worried about paying the bills.
That's so true. Yeah, that is so true. It's probably when you think about it, it's the number one thing that affects it. I think generally speaking, yeah, it's on my mind. I wouldn't say every day, but yeah, you're right. It affects society on so many different levels, doesn't it?
And it has so many implications that are not just to you. I mean, if you're not feeling well, that's obviously terrible. But a lot of people put up with not feeling great for a very long time.
Yeah.
But it's different if you don't have the money to pay your bills. It's not just you're letting down. It's your family and how people think of you. So there's a whole bunch of things attached to that is not, well, I'm going to put on a brave face and just bear with it. Well, you can't just bear with it if you can pay the rent, right? You'll be out on the street in a month or two, or you have to ask someone for help. And, it's just a very complicated thing to not have control over.
Fascinating. I'd love to see the stats with regards to people having, cancer and things like that, and how much of that is attributed to issues with money and debt and things like that. I reckon it'd be quite high.
Well, stress, I would think, has to be one of the leading factors for most things. And there's this thing they used to call, I think it was the CEO's heart attack, or the executive heart attack. But again, these are people that are successful, have a lot of money, but they're just under a lot of pressure. So their pressure comes from a different angle, but the pressure people feel, for whatever reason, takes a massive toll.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see it. Okay, is there anything else you want to add with regards to creating an education system where we're teaching kids more about money concepts?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things that the biggest problem with the education system, I think, is just so divorced from real life, right? So practical skills that everybody needs, finance, understanding money, cooking, speaking in public is something we talked about before.
Yeah.
So things you're 100% going to need in life, just personal interaction, right? How do you check information to see if it's true? If you're in a fight with someone, what's a good way to calm that fight down? Just basic interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
School doesn't teach almost any of that, or at least traditional school doesn't teach any of that. And I just think that the more we can tie what school is teaching to real life, the easier it is to find examples, the easier it is to make people interested, and then I think the whole of the curriculum gets a boost, because if a lot of it is interesting, the bits that are not so interesting, you can put up with a lot more easily. Whereas if you have, physical education is the only class you're interested in, and maybe, music, you have 80% of it or 85% of it is just boring. Whereas if 50% of it is interesting, even the boring bits, you're going to, give a bit more of your attention to, because you're just not fed up all the time.
Yeah. And also I want to factor in the idea of standardized testing with regards to that 80%. When you're bored, like I can attest to that. I was pretty much like that. I loved sport. That was about it, really. I didn't mind biology. I quite like that, and some aspects of history. But it was only sort of momentary interest. Other than that, the rest of it, I couldn't be bothered at all. And the idea of standardized testing, if you're not interested in the subject, you're not going to apply yourself, and you're going to get average grades or poor grades. But if you're then tested on your knowledge and you get a poor grade, you think that your self-worth drops, and you don't think you're as intelligent as you should be as other people who are interested. That's what I found. I didn't do particularly well at school. I did okay. But if I had had a pathway for sport, I think you can kind of grab subjects from different areas. So if you want to be a professional sports person, you could factor in biology, you could factor in the physics of the body, physiology, also the psychological aspect to sport, becoming a top sports person, instilling disciplines, habits. You can factor all that in. It should be, the way I see it, it should be more of a pathway for an individual rather than this block that currently exists. If that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it has started coming through. So there's one of the schools I visited in Barcelona when I was looking for a school for my daughter. They follow this super modern approach that is not very common in the world. I think there are hundreds of schools, maybe thousands, but it's a very small percentage, which is that they don't have subjects, they have projects. Right? Okay. So let's say that the project, for example, might be replacing the tire of a bicycle, right? So that's what you're going to teach. But then within that, you have how to calculate, the circumference of the tire, what the materials are, where do they come from, what's the history of a bicycle. So it's something like, I think it was 45 days that the project went on for. You cover all of these different things, and then at the end of it you say, okay, well, if you really like this bit, then we suggest this project. If you really like this other part, we suggest this other project. Right? And if you didn't like any of it, then go do something else, and then do the completely different projects. So you're trying to tie as much as you can together, get it multidisciplinary, and then it just becomes a much more interesting approach overall.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can see that. I would be interested in that. Okay. All right, Francisco. Thanks for joining me. I do appreciate it. Is there your time to promote yourself? Is there any links that you'd like to mention so people can get in contact with you if they want to seek financial advice?
The easiest way, well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. I don't use LinkedIn for the finance stuff because okay. I tend to leave that for slightly more exciting subjects. But you can find and connect with me on LinkedIn. But you can also go to the company's website, which is Blacktower FM. F for financial, M for management.com, and then you can reach me through that as well, or any advisor that is in closer to your area, because I'm based in Barcelona.
All right, lovely. Well, what I'll do at the end of this video, under this video on YouTube, I'll put those links in for you. And if anyone who's watching wants to make any comments, just leave them underneath, and feel free to subscribe. Other than that, I'd like to thank you again for joining me, Francisco. Thanks a lot.
Take care. It was good fun.
All right, cheers.